Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the annual Green Street Borough budget meeting. This will be for the budget of 2025. We'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Kim.
Ms. Barron,
Here.
Ms. Houts,
Here.
Mr. Panza,
Here.
Mr. Ray,
Here.
Ms. Schwartz,
Here.
Mr. Tintori,
Present.
Mayor Shank.
Okay. Before we start, is there any persons, any citizens that would like to wish or would like to address agenda items only tonight? Anybody have anything they would like to say? If not, we will move right into the presentation.
You can actually hang on to that, or,
Okay, so
yeah, I have a mic over here.
I turn it off.
You can, so I would suggest that, no, you can leave it on, maybe just set it on the chair, and then, since we don't have individual microphones, if you have a line of questioning that you want to do, it might be advisable to use the microphone, otherwise I don't think it will get picked up by the Zoom. Okay, well, welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to tonight's meeting. First thing I want to do is just to introduce the staff that's with us tonight. Kim Beck is here. She obviously is at every meeting taking care of us on the for the Zoom responsibilities and minutes. Babette Legler, our finance director, which she's like the magician behind the curtain. So getting all of our budget document together for us. Dana Trey is our library director. Jason Stanton is our appointed engineer from Lennon Smith. Carrie Ronner is our public works superintendent, and acting chief Chad Britton. So that's all our staff. And then we're not going to do staff presentations per se tonight, but Dana does have a little presentation she wants to do for the library. And then Jason will be with us to talk down through all of the projects that drain the budget. So, okay. So I'm just going to kind of go through and highlight, we have 14 funds that make up the budget. Some of them are restricted funds, some of them are non-restricted funds. The general fund is obviously the fund that brings in the most revenue. It's basically all of our operating revenues. The taxes in that category are real estate taxes, and then all your Act 511 taxes, which are our business privilege tax, earned income tax, local services tax. We also have, so in that thing, so the general fund brings in all the money, and then money is dispersed out of the general fund into the other funds by category. So you obviously have capital projects, which are, a lot of the bigger infrastructure projects, vehicle equipment purchases. The bond fund is the fund that houses all of the cash that we brought in from the 2021 bond proceeds. You'll see the number up there is low. And that money, the amount of money that is showing in there is what we would anticipate spending this year for the pool. The rest of the funds, as you may recall, we had invested in another investment vehicle, local government securities, so that we could earn revenue through interest and not have to pay tax on it. Highway Aid Fund, also known as Liquid Fuels Fund, just helps us with maintenance of roads. That is a restricted fund. Pension Fund is a restricted fund for an uncollected pension that is somebody still sitting out there. We're hoping they'll collect it at some point. Healthcare Fund, the Real Estate Escrow Fund. I'm going to hop around a little bit. The Reserve Fund, the Insurance Dividend Fund. Those are all funds that are not restricted. So council can draw on those funds as they deem necessary to balance the budget. And I'll be talking about that in a little bit. But then the restricted funds are the Highway Aid Fund, the Bond Fund, the Pension Fund, the Drug Enforcement Fund, the Green Tree Cemetery Fund. So what else? The sanitary. I'm seeing it. Sanitary. And it's sanitary sewer, right? So the sanitary sewer fund is a revenue fund. All the money that comes in there is then goes back out to pay for anything associated with sanitary sewer infrastructure. Fund payments go to Alcoasand for treatment. Money does not come into the general fund from sanitary, and general fund money does not go into support the sanitary expenses. Those funds stay completely separate. You may recall a couple of years ago, there was this process where they were kind of being included in the general fund for whatever reason, but I think it was back in 2023 was the first year that we pulled it out and we kept that separate. So that's just an overview of the funds. So the general fund this year is balanced at $6,753,077. To balance this fund this year, we did require a transfer from the interest dividend fund, which is an unrestricted fund, in the amount of $182,796. That is not uncommon. We've used that fund to balance both the general fund and some of the other funds as needed over the years. Probably one of the highlights, if you will, for good or bad, we are noticing that over the last maybe like 2 years or so, some of these large commercial properties have filed real estate tax appeals. Challenging the value of their property, and unfortunately, they have been pretty successful. So we did see, we're forecasting real estate tax revenues to be about $153,000 less in 2024 than what we budgeted for in 2020. For 25, lower than what we budgeted for in 2024. So that's, it's a little bit concerning. We do work with both the solicitor. The solicitor works with the solicitor for the school district. And, so we stay on top of those appeals, whenever they come about. Typically, the school district takes lead on it just because obviously they have a much higher tax rate and they have much more at stake. But we do work with them and make sure that we're present and conscientious of what's going on. So what that had the effect of doing, both the business privilege tax and earned income tax just had modest increases applied to them for this year. So all in all, when you factor in the reduction to the real estate and then the addition to the some of the other revenues, we come up at about just a little over $98,000 for budgeted revenues for 2025. So if anybody had any questions on, the council had any questions on revenue? No?
I have one question, but I'll just wait.
You want to wait? Okay. Okay, so moving down into expenses for the general fund. One of the more significant increases this year was for our member payment. As a member of Medical Rescue Team South, they've experienced higher call volumes, have had to do some staffing increases. As you know, staffing expenses continue to go up. And unfortunately, when they run through the formula in accordance with the bylaws, it will cost us $49,000 additional dollars this year. That's about a 54% increase. So, that is not something we wanted to see, but Medical Rescue Team South does a great job. And, running an ambulance service is just an expensive proposition, from the equipment that's required, the staffing and expertise that's required. So I still think it's a good value for the community. So as far as expenses in the general fund, these are just the operating expenses. We're not seeing any real significant increases in any particular line item. Our services provided are going to stay the same, whether it be leaf collection, electronic recycling. All of that is still in the budget. And again, it just does not sustain any significant increases that push the budget in one direction or another. One thing though I do want to note, so while it's only coming up 98,000 over 2024 budget, important to note is that about 100 and reduction to debt service. What's that? anyways, there was a reduction to debt service, and I want to say it was about $137,000. So back in 2014, there was a bond issue that was issued, and when we did the bond issue in 2021, some of the remaining debt on that was refinanced. And then the way that refinancing was structured for 2025 and 2026, all of the debt was going to be absorbed by the sanitary fund, sanitary sewer fund, and that's because that will close out that portion of the debt associated with the sanitary. So what that has the effect of doing is, while it takes the burden off of the general fund for years 25 and 26, it will put it back into the general fund in its entirety in 2027, correct? I think it's 2027. So in 2027, you'll see it'll go from 0 in 2025, 0 2026 to $499,000 in 2027. So that's definitely something that we're going to have to keep an eye on, for as we put together next year's budget. I think we're going to want to take a really close look to see what type of grant revenues we've been successful to get, what type of programming we foresee, because I know that everybody's mind is also where the refuse collection fee is going to go. And I recognize that that's a worry. That contract is in place for 3 more years, 25, 26, 27. So I think next year, this time is when we'll start talking about what kind of contracts are we seeing at that point in time too? Are they still just as high? Are they continuing to escalate? And then just try to look around and see what our options are for that. So other than that, one important to note is that, so I know everybody knows we're going out to bid for the new pool in hopefully February, March. I know we had talked about closing the pool for next year, and so that the construction give the contractor the benefit of the full year to get the work done. We had already talked about, briefly maybe trying to see if there's any way that we could open the pool next year and have construction start a little bit later in the summer, or even in the fall, and still get it done by May of 26. So what I've done is I've budgeted the pool, all the pool expenses are budgeted as though we're opening next year. So if by chance, it doesn't work out and we're not able to open up the pool, we'll realize about $236,000 at reduced expenditure, and that's net of the anticipated revenue. So, one of the things, so money comes, the way we have the fund set up, there's obviously sewer fund projects that are there, capital fund projects. Most of the big expenses are in capital, and some of the other big kind of capital type expenses related to stormwater and storm. But the general fund is the source for all of those funds. Other than the sanitary sewer fund, they don't generate revenue. So when we talk about getting grants, we'll put the money, say, into the sanitary sewer or into the storm sewer fund. But that's lessening the burden on the general fund. So to the extent that we, continue to pursue grants, I did put a grant summary in the budget document. Every time we get one of those grants, that helps to lighten the burden on the general fund, on what has to come out of the general fund, tax dollars to pay for these projects. So as I noted in the budget message, we've received about $8.6 million in grant funds over the last couple of years. Those will help with projects primarily for the Trumbull Drive Bridge. But because we did have those bond proceeds set aside for the bridge, those bond proceeds have been reallocated by council, you may recall, in July of this past year, to be spent on the pool. So that even with that allocation, there will still be bond funds remaining to be spent on other infrastructure projects. But I think before we would consider another reallocation ordinance, we would want to allow the grant award process to go through to see what other funds we may be able to get. And important to note, part of that $8.6 million, in addition to primarily being money for the bridge, We were just recently awarded the $500,000 for the pool. And there is another couple $1 million worth of grant applications out there. So, we just have to really hope that we can get some of those funds in here and then reallocate those monies to other infrastructure projects. So in general fund, again, there's not, it's mostly just budgeting projects. Storm Sewer has most of the capital stuff in it. And then capital has all of the non-storm, non-sanitary capital projects, such as the road program, vehicle equipment purchases, any types of park improvements are all included in the capital fund. But I'll touch on that for a minute or two. So I think that's about it on that felt like I needed to, unless council has any specific questions. Certainly we can go into the budget if there are any specific line items or areas that council has questions on. But overall, operating was pretty steady for 2025. Okay, so the capital fund, again, that's all of our non-operating projects that we'll be doing for 2025. There's also a supplemental 5-year capital plan budget, which just helps us forecast out different needs that we may have. One of the things I call attention to is that the HVAC system. This building had a lot of old HVAC equipment. We continue every year to replace different parts of the units, but we still have several more to go, and that's budgeted out over the next 4 to 5 years. So that the capital fund has been really helpful just to help us kind of foresee things coming up, and if we have any large cash outlays for some piece of equipment or whatnot, at least we can get it on the capital, and then we know that that's coming up. So again, that's we're looking at a budget for capital of expenditures of $3,381,000 and $3,381,400. So that's for 2026. Okay, so the sanitary fund, that we are looking at expenditures of $3,493,960. Alcosan's rate increases are scheduled at 7% for the next 2 years. And while this fund has a pretty significant reserve, if you look at it as a percentage, I always say a percentage of a small number is still kind of a small number. When you get into any type of sanitary sewer infrastructure repairs, they tend to be extremely costly. So we're going to recommend for this year the cost per 1,000 gallons to go from $6.50 to $6.75, and that would take place effective January 1st. And that's obviously billed based on water usage. So no increase to the base monthly rate. Okay, so the storm fund, last year for 2026, we were budgeted to transfer from one of the dividend funds, $360,000. That ended up not being required just due to maybe delayed completion of some projects. But that will be transferred in 2024. And we're looking at an expenditure budget of $1,773,585. This year, a couple of the more significant projects that we completed was the Holiday Drive storm project. That was just phase 1 of a multi-phase project, which Jason will be talking about in a little bit. That was completed. That actually came in under budget, so that was a good thing. We had a storm culvert restoration project down on Glencoe. That came about kind of abruptly, but that needed taken care of, so that was completed. And then the other large one that is budgeted for this year and actually have an on-site meeting tomorrow is the Arla storm outfall. So all of those types of projects are included in here. In addition to just a lot of general maintenance that comes about. Like earlier this year, there was a storm outlet on one of our roads that was sinking. So, you know, you gotta get out there, excavate it, and repair it, and I think that that came in at about maybe over $30,000. So these infrastructure projects can be pretty expensive, and unanticipated. So we're trying to keep on top of everything, head off problems in the past to the extent that we can by just routine maintenance and whatnot. It's a storm fund. Other funds in the budget that are not typically very active is the real estate tax escrow fund that has been established to cover these tax refunds that are due. Primarily where we really see the big expenses for these commercial real estate properties. Again, a lot of them have come in and we've spent over $70,000 in refunds this year because they take a few years to be finalized, and then it goes back to the point in time when they filed. So we're mindful of that, and $30,000 is budgeted for next year, but if it ends up being more than that, there's $629,000 in that fund. And I recommend we kind of keep that fund, you know, kind of healthy just to take care of any refunds that come due, so it doesn't have to come out of the general fund. And then the bond fund, again, as I mentioned before, that's just all the funds from the bond proceeds, which is for the bridge and the pool. And I can see where there will be an additional allocation ordinance to transfer some additional funds maybe to some of these other capital projects that we have planned or yet to be planned. You know, when we were talking about some of the funds, I did already mention just briefly that some of the funds are restricted, some of the funds are not. And what I think is, it's just important to note that while within the general fund, we do not show an unappropriated reserve, but that is because they are reserved through the use of other funds. And just, you know, if somebody's used to looking at government budgets, sometimes you look for that unappropriated reserve. We don't show it like that, but rest assured that, you know, reserve funds are available should we have any large capital outlays, you know, or just increased operating budgets like we may see with that waste management contract 2-3 years from now. All in all, so this budget is balanced. There will be no tax increase. There will be no cutback on any services provided to the residents. You know, I will say that I think it's a great budget. I think staff's done a great job of you know, watching the dollars and trying to get ahead of projects so that we can minimize the cost. Ultimately, it costs the borough to get these different projects done. So I don't know, council. So what I was kind of hoping to do, if council has any questions that they want to talk about right now, we can. Or I was going to turn it over to Dana. Dana would like to do a summary of the kind of presentation about the library. Obviously, the library is a tremendous asset. I know there's a lot of people in the room that know what a great asset it is, and that it's here for us almost all 365 days of the year. But I just wanted to have Dana just talk a little bit about it, all the different programming that she's been working on and completing, and what we have in store for us down there.
So is that okay then if I would?
Unless council would like to ask questions before.
Can you hear me okay?
That's better. You don't have to be too much better.
Thank you for providing me with this opportunity to speak tonight about the library. My name is Dana Trey, and I think I recognize everybody here, either from these meetings or a lot of your regulars at the library too. So some of this you already may know. And I have what I believe to be one of the best, if not the best, library in the county. And one of the reasons that we are so successful is because of the support from the community and also from Borough Council. We're very fortunate that the borough funds cover over half of the library's operating costs. The remaining costs to run the library are covered by other sources, including state funding, the regional asset district RAD, which, you know, is a portion of your sales tax in the county. There's private and corporate donations, grants, and fundraising. So during this presentation, I wanted to talk a little bit more about how these tax dollars impact the community positively. So as the public library, we're in the unique position to offer service to anybody who walks in our doors. So this is, people of all ages from birth through senior citizens. And when I say birth, I literally mean birth. We had a expectant mother come in and she registered her child who was in utero for our summer reading program, knowing that he would be born right when it was starting. So that gave us a little bit of a thrill. We serve those who are longtime Green Tree residents, some of the, people that grew up here, bought some of the original homes in the 50s or 60s. To those maybe who just landed in our community and are looking to get their first library card. We help people who are well versed in technology and know everything under the sun, and those who maybe don't know how to turn this thing on. So libraries are one of the last remaining places where everyone is welcome to visit and hang out without the expectation of having to buy something. So not only do they not have to make a purchase, but we encourage them to take our stuff, to take our books, borrow it, go home, and then return them later. So libraries are really the ultimate example of community trust and cooperation and goodwill. So if a library had never been invented and I walked in this room and then I described how they work to you and said, come on, who's on board? You'd probably look at me like I was nuts and send me home and say that would never work. But libraries do, and astonishingly so. For many, libraries are a place where they seek refuge. We recently, I don't know if you recall, I think it was last month, had a power outage in Green Tree. And the library was still running on generators, and we had a lot of our work from home people come in with their laptops and still be able to continue on with their productivity. We have a lot of parents who feel secure in allowing their kids to come after school, maybe before the parents are home, or come here to get homework help or to play games. And then also too, just on a hot summer afternoon, for people who don't have air conditioning, especially senior citizens, it might be very, very hot and unsafe for them to be at home. They seek out the cool climate of the library. So this is 6 days a week, 52 weeks a year. The library provides these services and more. So we do operate, around the clock, 45 plus hours a week. Communities with libraries are more desirable. People want to live where there are amenities, and you all are no strangers to this. People want the parks, they want the gardens, they want the pools. They also want the libraries that have that full group of amenities. They want libraries because they're a place to gather and connect and meet people and build relationships. And each person has a different reason for visiting the library. It changes from one person to the next, and also from time to time. And the library is always adapting to meet these changing needs as we try to extend our reach and our mission. So a small example of this is during the COVID-19 lockdowns, we were really trying to think of ways to engage with our patrons, and especially some of the children that weren't in school or we're going stir crazy at home. So we thought of this idea of offering grab and go craft kits, but we didn't want to interact with the patrons for fear of catching the virus or whatever. So we thought, well, we'll just pack these kits and set them outside and we'll be grab and go. We packed 50 kits with the idea that we would set them outside and people could help themselves that day, the next day, maybe over the weekend. No, we walked out with these 50 kits and we got ambushed by like every parent and grandparent in Green Tree. They were gone within 8 minutes. So that was a service that we noticed people wanted, so we continued that. And then when the library reopened, we continued to offer drop-in craft programs that have been very successful and that people have really wanted to seek out. It's also, important to note that you may see a craft program and think like, oh, that's really nice, but there's a lot that goes on kind of behind the scenes of a craft program. It's, teaching children how to follow instructions. It can be process-based. It's working on their fine motor skills. It's reinforcing a theme. Just something to keep in mind. You may have heard of the loneliness epidemic that's affecting our society. There are many people who are socially isolated. It's not just the elderly. There used to be a time when people had a third place. So that's defined as a place that's neither home nor work. So if you think in terms of like churches or American Legions or bowling leagues, that sort of thing, people don't engage in those activities as much or go to those places. And that's really where the library comes in. We can operate as this sort of third place for people to help combat the loneliness epidemic. So who are the users of our library? We have found that about 50% of the users are Green Tree residents, with the other half being residents of nearby communities. So the places you might expect: Scott, Carnegie, Crafton, Dormont, Robinson, the city of Pittsburgh. Currently, of the 4,870 residents of Green Tree, there are 2,539 who have library cards. So that's about 52% of the population of the borough. And because people don't really need a library card to use the library, you do need the card to borrow materials, but to walk in our door, to attend our programs, to use our computers, you don't need a library card. So in some ways that number is probably much less than, the data actually shows. Or the number is much higher, rather, the usage than the data shows. So we're very fortunate to be members of the Allegheny County Library Association. So that means that one library card works at all of the different libraries in the county, including the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh, which is technically the libraries that are in the city limits. So that's 45 libraries in the county, and of those, many of them have branches. So there's about 75 outlets throughout the county. So a cardholder, may choose to use Green Tree because it's close by, it's accessible by the bus line. They have the services that we offer, the services that they prefer, or they just really like the experience they have when they're here. And then the same can also be said of Green Tree residents. Sometimes they may not use our library because they're going to another library where their grandchildren live to go to story time, or they're stopping at the downtown and business library on their lunch break because they work downtown. So that's really the beauty of being a shared system like that. The library is used by people of all income levels. Those who are disadvantaged are more likely to rely on core services such as public computers, but again, everybody benefits from the library. And during times of economic struggles, like what we're seeing right now, libraries have historically seen an upsurge in usage. So you're probably no stranger to our cost of living crisis that we're undergoing right now with, housing and gas and groceries being high. And times like these, people are often forced to cut non-essentials from their lives. And again, that's where the library can come in. Individuals and families can borrow materials, books, movies. I'll get into some of this a little bit more later too, rather than purchasing them. I am an avid reader. I read about a book a week at $25 a pop from, a place like Amazon for a hardcover book. That adds up to over $1,300 a year. But if you think about little kids that are reading maybe 3 books before they go to bed, and they don't want to keep repeating the books, so they probably will want to repeat the books. That can also really add up, and a lot of families cannot afford that. Another thing is that the library's computers and wireless networks ease the burden of, monthly Wi-Fi payments at home. And we would pay for the Wi-Fi one time, but we can support so many people using the wireless. They can be in our parking lot, they can be in the park out back using it. And when money is tight and then maybe a family can't afford a trip to the National Aviary in the North Side, we can bring the aviary to them. We have actually had live penguins in this room before, believe it or not, with the aviary. And a good example of that is this year when the solar eclipse took place. Solar eclipse glasses were really hard to find, and those that were available, there's a lot of price gouging, they're expensive, and people didn't know if they were legitimate and safe. So the library was able to secure a grant, and we received 500 pair of the filtered glasses to give out to the public. And so just on top of that, we decided to invite an astronomy professor, and he talked about what to expect with the solar eclipse. And then we held a viewing party out back to watch the eclipse as a community, and over 300 people gathered in the back, and it was a really, really nice event. It was sort of a testament of our community. Supporting libraries is an excellent and sound use of tax dollars. The Department of Education Office of Commonwealth Libraries estimates that for every tax dollar invested in the library system in Pennsylvania, there is a return of $5.50 return on investment. So if there were no public libraries in Pennsylvania, the total economic loss to users and the local economy is estimated to be $1.3 billion. So it's easy to see how these numbers add up when you take into consideration all of the services and resources we offer at the library. We're always saying this, you know, we are so much more than just books, and many of you who've come to the library already know that. So I thought I would just briefly highlight some of the different things that you can do at the library with, or sometimes often without, with a library card. Take home and try out a new kitchen tool from our kitchen tool lending library. Borrow an American Girl doll or accessories for your own doll. Help your kids with their homework using the Power Library. It's our collection of databases. Stream audiobooks, ebooks, movies, and music with a service we call Hoopla. Attend an adult education class. This year, we've offered everything from a free guided meditation class to a hands-on workshop for improving kitchen knife skills with real knives, a lecture on native plants, an information session for first-time home buyers, to name a few. You can learn a foreign language with books and CDs in our language collection, or you can learn remotely with Duolingo or Mango, again, offered with your library card. You borrow magazines, either in the library or digitally. Find a job using our career books or online resources. Strengthen your child's literacy and learning, and meet other parents and caregivers through attendance at weekly story times. You can borrow learning tablets called Launchpads, which are preloaded with educational content for children. Enjoy live entertainment. This year we've had 3 musical performances. We had a cover band, a concert in the park, and a professional jazz duo. You can borrow a Wi-Fi hotspot to have internet access at home or on the go. Research purchases online with Consumer Reports magazine. Trace your family history with Ancestry Library. Access legal forms. Borrow a board game and have a family game night. Start a book club with one of our book discussion kits, or join one of the library's monthly book clubs. So in conclusion, the library is a thriving hub of knowledge, connection, and opportunity for everyone in our community. Investing in our library is investing in education, lifelong learning, and an inclusive future. With your support, we can continue to serve. Together, let's ensure our library remains a cornerstone of community for generations to come.
Thank you, Dana. That's awesome.
Any questions? Or is it?
If anybody has any questions, by all means.
I do, but only because I wanted to talk about something specific. Can I have-
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, no problem.
If you hold in the bottom, it should turn.
So you mentioned, the importance of our e-resources and, the e-lending that we offer through the library, which is, there's 2, Hoopla and, Libby, which is run through Overdrive. Those materials are incredibly expensive, astronomically. Where you would go to a store and purchase a library book for $25, and you can read that as many times, give it to as many people as possible. Actually, it'd be less than 25 because you'll get a discount, right? E-lending is per checkout, and is can be upwards of 4, 5, 6 times the price for one checkout of that book. We are only able to do that because we are a part of a consortium. If we were an individual library, we would be priced out of that. We would not be able to offer that. And I bring it up because those costs continually rise and the usage of those materials continually rise. It's very easy to see if you're going into a library, oh, there's so many books, everyone reads books. The rise of people reading digitally, whether through their phone, through a tablet, through an iPad, through a Kindle, continues to rise. And that is not just with adults. The e-resources for children make up about 60% of all e-lending throughout the county. So it is not just adults who are reading that way. Reading is changing, the cost of reading is changing. And I bring it up because the library is still a place where that becomes a very accessible way to access these materials. But I want council, and I bring it up, yes, I'm very knowledgeable, and I can talk about it for hours. But I bring it up because I think it's something that we all need to be aware of, because that is a growing cost for our library. It is our users who are reading through those materials. People who never step foot into the library are using the library daily to read magazines. All magazines are essentially now through Libby, through books, through lending. And both of those apps, both of those, they're like, you have to think of it as like a mini library, right? A digital library. Both of those services run their costs differently. Hoopla, it's per whatever you check out. So if I check out something, the library is getting charged for that checkout. It's going into that big pot of money that all of ACLA shares. And then if no one checks that book out again, we're never gonna get charged for it again. But Libby works different, where the libraries have to purchase the rights to have those books, and they have a limit for how many times they will circulate. So if you are purchasing, I'm gonna pick on James Patterson because I always do, but because he has so many books. So if you purchase a James Patterson book, the library in itself, meaning all libraries in Allegheny County, might only get 4 to 6 circulations on that book. But the number of people who want to read that are hundreds that go down that line. So the library, Allegheny County, has taken a lot of changes to how many things people can check out to reduce those wait times, hopefully, and to really like hyper focus on getting like the most bang for our buck. But it is something that is impacting Green Tree Library every day. The amount of money that Green Tree has to put into the pot for the county continues to rise every year. And that is how so many people are accessing materials. It allows for people to increase font sizes. They can listen to books while they're on there. All of the audiobooks are mostly through there now. Most publishers aren't even, like, the number of audiobooks that you can get on CD are like next to nothing anymore, because it's all going through these. So I bring it up because it's important to recognize that we see the physical space of the library and all of the work that Adina and her team do every day, 6 days a week, 52 weeks a year, but that is not accounting for all of the other work that happens behind the scenes of the library. And then the fact that we are a part of this bigger organization that we have access to. But those rises will continue, those costs will continue to rise, no matter how much space is downstairs or not. So I don't know if Dana, I was like, oh, I'm gonna talk about this thing, but.
It's definitely a trend that, that we have tracked through the years, especially since COVID. We've really seen an increase in, downloading e-resources and streaming as well. And our payment every month, or every year rather, we're billed annually, does go up. I mean, we account for it, and perhaps we buy less print materials or, increase our budget in that way. And also the county does a good job too. They have a whole formula that they work out, they cap it. And like Shannon said, they've recently changed some of the hold limitations. So there were a lot of real power users. They were only 0.5% of the users, that they had to like lessen the number of items that they could borrow or stream. So it's really like we're trying to, rethink how, the money is spent. And it always seems silly to explain to a patron when they, want a book on their phone, well, I see it here, why do I have to wait? It's digital. But like Shannon explained, you have licensing and they don't allow, multiple people and multiple copies, and you might only be able to, give that to 6 people, and then the license is done, and then you have to purchase a new one. So that's largely what we're up against when it comes to the e-resources that are a growing resource for the library.
Anything else? Yeah, I just wanted to welcome Don Gott, our fire chief. I noticed he came into the room, so I didn't introduce him before, but he's here. So if there's any questions about the fire apparatus fund or the operating section of the budget, certainly he's here to answer questions. Does anybody have any other questions about the library?
Did just want to point out, I did double check the average cost of one license for an ebook would be $60 for like 4, less than 4 checkouts. Whereas if you would go buy that same book in Barnes and Noble, it would cost you $17.
So we had touched on, the general fund. I don't know if does council want to talk, do you want to have any questions about general fund revenues or general fund operating expenses? Because what Jason's going to be going over is primarily those capital expenses that are in both the capital fund and are accounted for in the storm sewer fund. So I don't know if you had any general operating budget questions. Do you want to grab it?
I would say let's get through the presentation.
The whole
Yeah,
thing?
and then
Okay, great.
let them go and we can hit you up with all our.
Yeah,
questions.
good. Well, if it's capital, that's.
Everyone hear me okay? First of all, my name is Jason Stanton, one of the managing principals at LSSE. Located in Coriolis, it's a pleasure to serve Green Tree Borough Council and its constituents in an engineering capacity for the past 2 years. Serve alongside. Collaboration is key, communication is key with our Department of Public Works, as well as our administration, in implementing infrastructure projects that are important to our residents, including sanitary sewage, storm sewage, storm sewers, and other capital fund projects that I'll get into detail in a little while. In terms of the sanitary sewer system, Green Tree Borough is in a very good position relative to the phase 2 consent order agreement. All 83 municipalities that are tributary to Alcosan are covered under the phase 2 consent order. 2 years ago, Green Tree Borough, based on where our flows were, updated their sewer lateral ordinance to require a televising requirement during the real estate transaction. And that's been an active program, and with that, complied with the source flow reduction requirements of the phase 2 consent order. Very few municipalities in Allegheny County can say that. Green Tree is one of them. That being said, work still continues on a daily basis, maintaining our sanitary sewer system largely with the Department of Public Works. In response to routine call coordination with real estate transfers and the televising ordinance. 3 primary initiatives that I wanted to mention tonight is first, council awarded an operation and maintenance blanket contract approximately 2 months ago for cleaning and televising our sanitary sewer system in a 10-year incremental basis, a 10-year program that we could clean and televise our entire sanitary sewer system. That project's likely to kick off in December. Wilson Excavating and Utility Construction was the low bidder for that work. invoicing and things like that that impact budgets will likely occur in January. So that's an initiative that even though we're in good shape relative to the phase 2 consent order, Green Tree Borough is still moving forward with proper operation and maintenance of the sanitary system. Item number 2 is a relatively smaller project that was recently identified that will require an open excavation to the rear of Park Edge Drive. A 20-foot roughly excavation followed by a lining project, and that work's likely to start early in December with the excavating there. And then our office, in concert with administration and public works, maintain an ongoing storm and sanitary sewer project list. Any complaint that's fielded by public works or administration, any catch basin that is showing signs of deterioration goes on to that list. And as the year evolves, those repairs are made. In terms of storm sewers, as Judy has mentioned, this past year, a project was implemented primarily in front of the formerly Royal Plaza on Holiday Drive. There was areas of significantly deteriorated storm sewer that was repaired in that general area that, as Judy had mentioned, that's a small initiative of a much larger project that the borough still has 2 pending grant applications that we're keeping our fingers crossed relative to receiving grant money. Again, the storm sewer repair list, those repairs, sanitary and storm, are repaired under the borough's roadway and sewer maintenance blanket contract. We have a contract with the vendor Casper Colosimo. It is a 5-year contract, so any repairs that need done are identified. There's a redefined contract with Colosimo to perform those repairs. One of the budget items coming up in 2025 along Humble Avenue near the Delta Slope of the Parkway is there's a concrete trough that was constructed many moons ago, if you will. There's about a 50-foot section of that needs replaced early in 2025. It's included in the budget, as well as the Arlen Drive storm sewer discharge. That discharge, a storm sewer discharge that drains Arlen Drive, discharges to location on Blanco Road that's been eroding for several decades. And that work is scheduled to start within the next 2 weeks. Last but certainly not least, council may have, well, one of my colleagues, John Walensky, was in council last week talking about the pollution reduction plan. That's the 5-year storm sewer permit the Green Tree Borough has, state mandating, implementing certain projects to remove nutrients, primarily phosphorus and nitrogen and sediments in our streams. And 2 projects were identified there. Rain garden implementation over in Green Tree Park, that work's largely completed. There's still some punch list items that will carry forward into 2025. The larger portion of that is the stream restoration along Whiskey Run down along Blanco Road. Those permits were submitted last week. I anticipate a couple of 3 months for DEP to issue those permits for the construction to start in early spring. That task also included coordinating with approximately 8 to 10 property owners that own private property along the stream to get their blessing, if you will, on right-of-way agreements, environmental conservation agreements. So those tasks have been completed, and, we'll move forward in 2025. So that's an overview of sanitary and storm in 5 to 7 minutes. Other capital projects include the 2025 road program. That budget memo is in your packets this evening. There's certainly a lot of items there that will need to be called down, if you will, to the borough's preferred budget of around $775,000. One of the thought processes was to phase the Green Tree Park paving. Not only for budgetary purposes, but also for functionality of the park. So those are the 8 primary, roadways that was included in the budget memo. And typically, December, early January, collaborate with staff and get any feedback from council and move forward with a portion of that scope. That's how the past several years has evolved, with the road program. Other capital fund projects include, a new vestibule for the fire department. That's currently awaiting grant funding, primarily on the side entrance, just to have an entrance vestibule ready to hang coats and, kind of shield, those that are enjoying the social hall, and keep them out of the weather, if you will. Another initiative, the Green Tree Borough has made progress in the past with the Green Tree Road Sidewalk Program. A significant amount of sidewalks have been repaired in the last 4 to 5 years, and the borough was able to obtain a grant through DCD for a little under $250,000. We were asking for a much larger sum, but the state was able to allow us to reduce the scope to minimize our out-of-pocket cash, if you will. So that scope is also in the PennDOT for permits for both construction as well as signalization permits. And that scope is from McMonagle to Banbury on the southerly side of Green Tree Road. It's the intent to go back to the state, request another grant funding program. And with that said, the borough has a master plan in place that was in your budget package of probably 8 or 9 grant cycles that over time would replace all the sidewalks along Green Tree Road and some other roads. Moving on in terms of capital projects, CPR 50, the borough was recently made aware of some supplemental grant funding that was awarded. The process is moving forward on dilapidated structure at Mansfield Avenue. Similar in fashion to prior demolition projects that the borough has implemented. CPR 51 applications have been filed to complete the detectable warning surface replacements in the past 2 to 3 weeks. You may have seen prior excavating replacing those detectable warning surfaces along Green Tree Road near the Parkway near Manila Avenue. That was funded with CD funding from CPR 50. Again, applying for that funding to complete that work, as well as to budget additional funding for ADA improvements associated with the full bass house. ADA improvements are an eligible cost, a good way to put another fishing line in the water, if you will, in terms of grant funding for upgrades for borough facilities. Also, pool improvements, that schedule, there's a design consultant working on that. Judy mentioned that schedule earlier. That grant funding, or one of the grant applications that was applied for in November of 23, recently was awarded $500,000 for pool improvement. So that was a good finding, a good award. Other initiatives, very briefly, one of the, budgeted items in the past, let's say, 15 to 20 years, the borough has an active GIS, Geographic Information System, program called GeoDecisions. That program or GeoDecisions has transferred hands. Some of the staff has turned over. One of the things that the borough's evaluated is replacing it with a very similar product. And, more robust in terms of permitting, sanitary and storm sewer, asset inventories, things like that. I believe that that's factored into this next upcoming budget. Municipal building restroom improvements, that contract was awarded, that construction will likely start probably 1st of December. Shop drawing process is ongoing. That'll enhance the ADA accessibility of our administrative floor restrooms. That's an initiative that's coming up in 2025. And again, fingers crossed, the borough applied for a DCNR grant to upgrade some of the facilities at Park Edge Park. And we anticipate late spring, early summer for that grant announcement. By the time that grant is awarded, grants inspectors on, and then forwarded back to DCNR for their approval. It's probably a 2026 project, but certainly one initiative to be aware of coming up in 2025. That largely is a snapshot of the capital programs. They're included in the budget, and I'll do my best to answer any questions that you might have.
One thing I think is important to note, a little bit different, we had departure from what we did last year was, last year for grant applications, we would program the revenue and then fully program the expense. And that just made the budgeting process just a little bit too complicated, especially the way the budget carries from year to year. So this year, that's why we did the grant summary. We only put in the budget grants that have been awarded, which were those at the top of the page in black. And then, I don't know if we have that slide or not, but, this one. We did put, then those, so the only ones that are actually in the budget are those that are, the contracts that have been, or the grant awards that have been received, notified, and then we budgeted out the expense plus the match. So all the rest of the grants that are in the pipeline are just summarized on the budget summary page. So we're still hopeful. That's over $5 million worth of grant applications out there. So we're hopeful we'll get those. Some.
We're under consent to create. Sorry, you mentioned that sanitary.
I think holding the button on the bottom.
Right. After a few minutes ago. Hello.
Hold it in.
Press. Hello. Yes. Okay. You mentioned the sanitary sewer consent order. When does it expire, if ever?
Yes, well, phase 2 consent order has a sunset date of December 2029. A lot of municipalities are required to implement their source flow reduction projects this budget year, in 2025 budget year, followed by post-construction monitoring in 2026, and allows for 2 years of negotiations with the regulatory agencies. In Green Tree, we're fortunate that with our lateral ordinance that we adopted, we don't have to implement a source flow reduction project. And, but again, the correct answer to your question is December 2029.
And is Green Tree Borough in line to have it expire in 2029?
Yes, that date is consistent across all 83 municipalities.
Okay, I thought maybe if we were violated it, they extended it or whatever, but,
There will be a phase 3 consent order that follows that.
Okay,
until Alcoasand implements their clean water plan,
okay.
which is still a decade or so out.
And all 83 municipalities will have to go into phase 3.
Yes,
Okay, and everything that you described, just to match it up with the budget, in the sanitary sewer, is O and M yearly maintenance, $60,000, CCTV investigations, 25,000, sewer lining, 150,000, manhole restoration, 30,000, deficiency correction, 200,000. So those, what I read from the budget covers what you mentioned.
yes, and by and large, the scope of some of that lining and some of those activities isn't necessarily defined at this point. The O and M contract that I mentioned will likely bear the scope of some of that work out, but yes, that's what's covered.
And then lastly, just on the storm sewer fund, if I'm reading this correctly, in 2024, I'm talking about last year, it looks like we got two different grants totaling $1,275,000.
Yeah.
And we spent that money on
Sanitary.
Municipal park.
No,
Okay.
we did get $1.275 million
That's
in grant funding.
right.
Only about 300,000 of that was spent on the rain gardens in Green Tree Park. There's about 900,000 that's left in that grant funding for the stream restoration project.
Okay, so where I'm confused then, in 2024 on income, it mentions those two grants on page 14. It mentions the 1.275,000. And then but down below on expenditures, it has 1,050,000 of that grant money being spent and $300,000 of the other grants. How do you reconcile the two?
Yeah, what page is on there?
It
14.
It was paid for, Mayor, out of the monies already in the storm fund. We did not receive that grant funds yet.
It's a 2025, that's where I'm getting confused. In 2024, it's the 1.275,000. In 2025, it's a 1,275,000. Is that the same money?
So we have not, so as I mentioned in my budget message, grants are reimbursement based. And we have not been reimbursed yet.
For 2024 or 2025?
Just for 2024, we don't get it until we spend it. Now, we've just finished up that project, but we have not received the funds yet. So it will still come in next year.
Okay, so when we have the expenditures in 2024, does that come out of our own pocket? And we're waiting to be reimbursed?
Yes, we have money, as you see, that fund started with $542,000. And it had anticipated a transfer in, but we didn't have to do that. So you can see that the fund balance projected is very low. It's only at 107,000. But we'll be getting those funds, and we may get them by the end of the year, but we haven't received them yet, so we still wanted to. It's likely they'll come in after the first of the year.
All I was trying to do is from the revenues, match that 1 million on the revenues with the expenditures with the same grant. I mean, it's just trying to compare apples to apples. Up above, it's 1 million in 2024 with the grant, and then down below, the expenditures 1,550,000.
And that can, we could put that, we could move it back into, but it doesn't matter. The money's gonna, we're not accounting for the revenue twice, is what I'm saying.
I'll have to check with you.
Yeah.
I'm a little confused with that one.
Yeah, so we're not, we had hoped to get it in 20, because you can see that same money is in 2024 too. Budgeted. It's there. So we're not counting it twice. We're only counting it once. We're just counting it, like, we're moving it over, moving the revenue over. We're pushing it out.
I guess it's not a way to do it in the budget, but it would be, and maybe it's elsewhere, just nice to know when we're talking $1 million exactly where it's spent.
Yeah, right.
I mean, we have the grant
We
In
could,
the income.
Yeah.
Revenue, we have an expenditure, but we just don't know where the money, I mean,
right,
we do know, but.
and maybe what we could do too is it's easy enough to add a footnote or two at the bottom of that page, just so it's kind of clear, like where it's going.
Thank you.
Steve's starting off, yeah.
Do we think we'll have any additional questions for Dana? I was just gonna say if it's not necessary for this, since she's already done her presentation. All right, Dana.
Thank you for having me.
Early dismissal.
Questions or anything?
I think he's waiting for the microphone to come back. Battery.
Okay, Jason, thanks for coming tonight and presenting. I have one question about consent decree, not budget related, but city of Pittsburgh, they how accountable we have to a consent decree and separate their systems like municipalities, right?
The city of Pittsburgh is currently negotiating their own consent decree directly with the Department of Justice. So I'm not sure exactly where they're at in that process, but I don't believe that it's finalized yet. Ours is with the Allegheny County Health Department.
Okay, so then ours still flows into the city at some points and it's.
That's
clear
correct.
with my system. Yeah.
Yes.
The borough's been quite successful with obtaining grants to pay for a bunch of different projects. Last year, I think you mentioned, or Ms. Miller mentioned that, your firm was responsible for the lion's share of those grants, we've been submitting those grant applications. I'm wondering this year, how many of those grants were you involved?
I believe in just summarizing, is the grant table up there? The vast majority of it.
Okay, and about, just estimate, about how long do you put, is it you that does it, or do you have somebody that?
No, we have one of our staff, that works routinely with the borough and is very familiar with all the grant funding applications. Does it under my supervision.
And about how long do you think it takes to do one? Just as ballpark hours.
It depends on the grant application. Probably 6 to 8 hours.
Per application.
Yeah.
Okay.
Depending on location maps and different things like that. I think I summarized, during the last work in progress meeting, about $2.6 million, something like that. That, collaborating with borough staff, we were able to secure for the borough.
Great. I appreciate that. And then, in that grant report, it shows that there is, a matching requirement. some of the matching requirements are listed, others have a percentage. In total, it's about 1.7 million, so I don't know, Jason, if this is a question for you or Ms. Miller. But if the borough was successful in obtaining all of these grants, how does that 1.7 million fit into the budget? On the matching side of it.
So the ones in black are budgeted, they're in the budget. And then the ones down below, so for instance,
Is the match budget?
not for the ones that we haven't received yet, because
Right,
we
the
don't
ones
know
in
what
black,
they
they are
received.
budgeted.
Blacks are budgeted.
So the date, so is the date that we received the grant, or that we requested the grant, or when the project kicks off? Well, obviously when the project kicks off.
Those are awarded. You can see, like, you're talking about the 2023, 2024. Those are the year it was awarded.
Okay, so then we put mass 600,000, about 800,000, 900,000 in this year's budget for matching funds against projects that have a grant.
So
If I add up,
if it's budgeted in, then it would be budgeted out. So in other words, so the PRP improvements, we just saw that on the page we were just on. That 1,275,000 is budgeted out plus the match.
oh, it's 1,275,000,
Yeah.
okay.
Now, that we put percentages down below because, like, say for instance, the sidewalk grant, we put in for 708,000. But we only received 247, so we're scaling back that projects because we don't have that. many.
So is that match per project, so is that invoices paid, or is that just we have to show money coming out of the general fund?
So Jason Jason and his team have assisted us with doing is saying, so we've got $247,000. There's a 30% match. So we take the project up to the total of the grant award plus the 30% match. And then we put out a project that hopefully will come in within that amount. But if the project comes in high, like say it came in at $500,000, that would be more than 30%. So then it's up to the borough to decide if we want to do it or not. They will always take grant money back.
Understood.
The other element specific with that program is the borough's already purchased some of the flashing beacons and safety improvements. And they're essentially just waiting to be installed. That purchase is an eligible cost that if we show that expenditure as part of our match, that reduces obviously the cash outlay there.
Okay. Good, and then, London Smith isn't doing the bridge, right, that's,
Yeah, that's fine.
That's all the questions I had for Mr. Stan. Thank you.
Just one last one. I noticed the City Vista pump station, we had to take that over. That was decided by council years ago, but it's,
We have not taken it over yet.
okay, geez, okay, but we spent 25,000 last year and 30,000 this year.
We did not.
Budgeted.
We budgeted, but we did not spend.
Okay, we budgeted 25,000 last year, but did not spend.
We budgeted 30 this
30,000.
year. I don't know if it'll come to fruition or not.
So when will we be taking it over?
As soon as they move on it. They have not, they've had some significant changes in leadership and they have not brought forward to us what they need to in order to make the transfer.
So as soon as they do, that's when we're gonna start to incur the 30,000 for the maintenance costs.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they still have some tasks that need completed before we formally install it.
Okay, and then who would do that maintenance? I mean, our maintenance department, or is it specialized?
Specialized.
It's specialized, given that it's a lift station, would require a certified operator to make, operation decisions, different things like that. And then budget's based on a proposal that we obtained for last year's budget. In the event that we needed, we wanted to factor that operating cost into our budget.
Okay, thank you.
So that is all of the staff presentations. Does council, certainly we could throw up any of the, individual, expenditure lines.
I have a question about the presentations. Were all the departments given the opportunity to present? Some did, some didn't. Just did
If
Dana?
they, well, Carrie did not, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie, that there's not much to present, right? So the things that Public Works does are the same from year to year. The police department budget is probably 85% salaries.
Yeah, and they
Don't
come
have
in on the budget
projects.
every time. That's great. What about the fire department? Were they?
They were invited to come. Yes,
To give a
Dawn
presentation.
said that he was not going to be present tonight. I was surprised to see him tonight.
Okay,
And I also invited the fire department president as well,
Great.
but he also had it.
great.
Now, if Dawn would like to do any kind of presentation, he is more than welcome.
I don't know, I'm sure if you guys need any questions. Pretty much similar to that, year in, year out, depending on what call for you. Number one.
So with the fire department last year, I know there's some back and forth with their budget request and how that played into the budget. How did that work out this year? Okay. So,
And then I will say, just because you're on the topic of the fire department, I did mention in the budget message that starting with last year, I believe it was last year was the first year, we did a $100,000 deposit. That's a general fund deposit into fire apparatus fund. And that is to help build that fund balance so that when the time comes for the replacement of that aerial truck, we won't be faced with having to borrow for it. Right now, the interest rates are favorable for us, so we're saving, hopefully making some interest, and that'll be that much less we have to borrow down the road, so.
Just some general comments on MRSA. The amount we're paying would be this year's $138,197. I mean, that is a big increase, but it's still a great deal.
It
I mean,
is.
MRSA, I'm a member of my household. I mean, they help out the community so much. One vehicle would cost a lot more than $138,000. So even though it went up, it's doing well. As to the fire department, this is not monetary, but I do notice in their message, they did 254 calls, 19 fires and 2,100 hours of training. So we thank for all those volunteers for responding to that many calls and doing that much training. And then lastly, but not least, the police department, what I note here is projected for 2024. The salaries are around $850,000 for 2024, and overtime is $325,000. That's because we were severely short on officers. So that comes out to about 1.2 million. So the police department did an excellent job when they were short. They spent, time away from family, so I'd like to thank them for that. I'd like to compare that to 2025 budget. The projected for salaries is $1,075,000. In overtime is $145,000. So it comes out to about 1.2 million again. So when we were short and when we were full staff, it's about the same, but it's just a big strain in the police department when we're short, and they really upheld their end, and they're still doing it because they're just training those two officers, and they're not going to, I guess, work on their own probably till December, right? Mid-December, so they're still, but anyhow, it costs the same to the borough. It didn't cost us any more with all that overtime with the police. It just put wear and tear on our officers, and I thank them for that.
And certainly, council has, any follow-up questions, please email me, those. I think, Mayor, we will, just based on your question within the storm, sir, we put some footnotes when it gets to grants and payments and things like that, just so it's a little more clear, how those grant funds are being spent.
all right, I have more questions. Did you have another comment?
Yeah.
About
month or 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, I asked for a little bit more transparency in the budgeting process. More communication around the budget. I request next year that you give us more than 3 days to review the budget.
You know, I think the problem with this year too is to push it out, it would have been Monday of Thanksgiving week, so. I think that's why it fell with the way the calendar fell this year with the 15th being a Friday. And then obviously we have it typically the Monday following.
We'd like more than
Sure.
3 days.
Absolutely,
Thank you.
put it on the calendar.
All right, so. In the budget measures, we talked about anticipated millage increase in 2026. We've had several residents. Come before us and ask, they communicated they're on fixed income and would prefer. Not to have a big hit all at once and really spread out and increase it over time. Is that something that we should consider? I think the last time we had millage increase, it was a pretty big hit. And after that, residents came before us and said, hey, that was a big hit. Next time, can you consider spreading it out over time? Is that something that we should be considering?
I would not recommend it for the 2025 budget, but I absolutely think that, and again, I think a lot of it will depend on how successful we are with these grant programs, because again, having brought, I'm sure a couple million or a couple of years ago, we would not have imagined that we would have a bridge 95% paid for. Obviously we went out and got a bond for that. So I think things happen, and I would be hesitant to recommend taking money from the residents now when we don't need it now. And I certainly do not suggest we wait until we need it, but I think we should at least be prudent and consider waiting until we can reasonably expect things are going to be beyond what the current level of revenues can support.
One could argue that we do need it now because we are dipping into our funds to balance the budget. Is that correct?
We did, but we typically do, and I can tell you that, I've been doing borough budgeting for 30 years, and that is not uncommon. That's why you have reserves.
You said we typically do, but in 2022, 2023, we did not dip into, at least we didn't dip into the insurance dividend fund.
But last year, we did budget to transfer over $300,000 from dividend into storm sewer fund. It just depends where the expenses falling to the operating side, or if they're falling into the capital side. Even the capital spending on everything that we have, they sit with a $1 million, the capital fund sits with a $1 million fund balance. That's pretty significant. And there are other funds that have significant balances, and certainly if councils, that's the approach you would like to take. I just do not believe for 2025 it's time to implement that tax increase.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I would
But
think,
we are dipping under.
next year you could do something modest potentially, if things continue on the trajectory that they are now. We don't really get any, much in the way of grants. You could do maybe like 1/3 of a mil, and then maybe the year after that, maybe 1/3 of a mil. That equates, kind of looked at it just to have it in mind, but I think it was maybe $75 in a year. Which is not, I did not see it, and that was on $150,000 assessment. So, yeah, I definitely think we need to be mindful of it between the debt service and what waste management may throw our way. I'm gonna keep an eye on how other contracts are coming in and being renewed. One of the things, it's just something that I see as an opportunity, because Trinity is small, geographically small. We have a small number of homes that are in the collection route. I think we may have a better opportunity to secure the services of some of the smaller companies that are hungry for the business. And I think that council would be comfortable moving away from a big name brand like Waste Management. I noticed Mount Lebanon, for instance, is using county clothing. So I think that's why I'm not ready to pull the alarm yet. I think we need to give it some time.
So of the funds, which ones are unrestricted that we can use to balance the budget?
The reserve fund.
Okay, so the reserve fund, right now we have,
I can tell you the total, I know the total.
yeah,
I mean, we're,
so it's 659,000, right?
I can tell you the total of unrestricted funds
Okay,
is $4.7 million.
okay, so what is a good percentage of the budget where we should have?
So typical, a GASB, Government Accounting Standards Board will recommend between 5% and 15% as a minimum. And we are currently at 69%.
Okay, so of those unrestricted funds, are any of them earmarked for anything?
Some 700,000 is in the fire apparatus fund, which I would not recommend that we touch because that's for future capital improvements that we know that we need.
Okay.
$1 million of it is in the capital fund. So typically, and communities do budgets differently, but you can reserve on individual funds. But if the source of those funds is coming from the general fund, typically you keep the reserve in the general fund because that's the source of revenue for capital. Capital doesn't have revenue. The reserve fund doesn't have revenue. You know, the real estate escrow fund does not have revenue. So there's multiple ways of doing it. I think how it's set up now does make some sense because again, the fire apparatus, it's good to build a kind of designated, it's a purpose that you have for future to buy that aerial truck. Real estate escrow, we know that we're 42% commercial. Those refunds are expensive. So I think it's wise to keep that fund. And then you have just a general reserve fund, which is kind of just what it says. Now that in and of itself would not be enough for the general fund at over $6 million. But when you add up those funds, right now our reserves are pretty healthy. And I think that it's just prudent to give it another year, next year this time, and see where we land. How do those come down? How are the expenses and the projects that we would like to compete, how do they bring that down?
So when you say unrestricted, the four something million, right?
4.7 is
4.7
unrestricted.
million, that does not include the sanitary sewer fund?
It does not. That has its own reserve of $2.3 million.
So just so I know, you know,
Sure.
covered this, but
I think I listed them, but so capital,
capital,
reserve.
sure,
Oh yeah, they're all listed on that front page.
insurance dividend,
Yes, so, yeah, if you go, let's just go down from the top.
Yeah.
So the storm sewer fund, which actually has no reserve right now, because we're spending it. You know, and once you do the money that's there and the expenses, it doesn't have a reserve at the end of the year. Capital is unrestricted. Healthcare fund is unrestricted. The real estate tax escrow fund is unrestricted. The reserve fund is unrestricted. The fire apparatus fund is unrestricted, as is the insurance dividend fund.
okay, but fire apparatus, we probably, like you said, we won't touch that.
I think council has the mind that they would not want to. So sometimes what you could do is you could say it's an unappropriated reserve or an appropriated reserve.
Okay, and then we have expenses, so like the insurance dividend fund, the money that we use to balance the budget, is that considered an expense? In that second column?
It shows that it's coming out as a transfer.
I know that 550,000 is the 180 something that we use to balance the budget. Part of that 550.
It's part to the general fund and part to the storm sewer fund. 380 went to storm sewer and then what's it, 187, I think that went.
So
to
then
general.
what is the remainder? Not again, I can look at it.
At the end of the year, 1.2 million.
No, of the 550, 180 something is used to balance the budget. What's the remaining?
I'm not sure where you're at.
Right on the front page.
Yeah.
550,996. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. So those are 2025 anticipated expenses, the 550,000.
The first column's where we're starting, the fund balance and the
Balance,
revenues, less
right.
the expenses with
Right.
the ending fund balances.
So what I'm trying to figure out is, what are we spending that 550,000?
Which line are you on?
Insurance dividend, last line.
Okay, yes, so 300 and I believe 300 some is going to the storm sewer fund.
Okay,
And then another 100, and I want to say it's like 37, 182 is going into the general fund.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where does that come from? Where's the revenue for that fund come
From our insurance dividend checks from the insurance program that we're in.
from? Okay,
Because we're in a self-funded pool, so they evaluate your claims relative to your premiums, and then you get rebates.
okay,
It's an extremely great program.
thank you. All right, so. On the revenue side, so, earned income. I'm trying to understand, maybe, this is probably a lot of
Right there.
things that affect this, but in 2022 is 1.18 million. 2023, 1.2 million. It's coming down this year, 1.1 million. Now, I realize that might be due to retirements, individuals going on fixed incomes, that revenue coming down. Do you have any insight as to why it's coming down? I have a similar question with business privilege, which has been pretty consistent over time. And I would anticipate that to increase as companies, increase their profits, that number should be increasing too, but it seems flat.
But I don't, and then I don't know that they're increasing profits, right? Because everything is more expensive to either produce, more expensive employees. I'm not sure that their profit is necessarily increasing.
The office parks aren't full.
Yeah, there are some vacancies. I mean, I've talked to, the management company at Foster, and they said they're holding their own. They've been pretty steady on their leases and whatnot, but like Talent takes up a huge spot over in that business park, and they're nonprofit, so they're not paying anything.
Now that we have the new code enforcement officer, I know there's some talk earlier this year, we were going to go out and ensure that companies that should be paying that are paying it, or at least that we know where the businesses are in the borough.
Yeah, actually, I initiated a conversation with Jordan Tax to try to see if I could get some support through them. I think that's a much more efficient means by which to accomplish that. So I've reallocated that time. Unfortunately, the one thing they do need to go out and kind of snoop around is for the mechanic device taxes, but that's not a big source of income. So, but I still like to make sure everybody's paying.
This is a small thing, the crossing guards, that's a reimbursement to the school district. Those are under contracts, so those are
They
shared. So,
do, yeah.
Page.
I have a question about interest earnings, but I don't see, I have it written down, but I don't, interest earnings on investments, so 341. And went up significantly in 2023. And then back down a little bit. 2024.
At this time, I would like to add, my one question tonight was dealing with the same subject. So we may as well merge our question and ask, those numbers to me are a little shockingly low, only because you've just discussed, we're holding like $4.5 million
That's just
in
general.
reserves.
That's just the general fund. Every fund has its own interest earnings.
Okay. So realistically, what are, when we have extra money laying around before we spend it? What does it sit in? Does it go to PNC Bank and at a 0.1% interest?
Play
and
it.
sit there?
Play it.
It does go to play it.
Yes.
And their current interest rate
It-
approximately?
Yeah, I don't know. It varies. It's been pretty good this year,
I would
actually.
say it's in and around 4%.
I don't know. I don't want to guess.
I might not be completely accurate on that, but I do remember we had a little bit of a conversation about that. Just trying to see comparatively when we looked at, what those state and local government securities were producing, for the bond funds. because we had it in Pliget, at that time. I believe that was the investment vehicle.
Yeah, it was.
And we were, I just wanted to make sure that we were gonna get hopefully a comparable interest, and we were told that we could. And obviously then also keep it, had we kept the money in Pliget, we would have to pay back all the interest over and above the borrowing rate of 2.75. So that was it. That's also money that goes back into that bond fund to be used for other infrastructure projects at some point.
So we're making significant interest on these funds.
Yes,
Yeah.
we are.
And give a ballpark. Total.
You'd have to go down.
I know,
through
it's just-
everyone, yeah.
It's high.
The, back to the insurance dividend fund, just on the fund page itself, page 26. It's not showing the transfer to general. Unless I'm misreading it.
There isn't one this year. It'll be for 25.
Where's the money, where's the 187?
Huh?
The 187. Part of 550 that came out, and then some of it went to storm and some of it went to.
It's right here. It's for 25.
For 20,
Okay.
oh, you're talking about, yeah, that's for
we
25,
need-
not 24.
okay.
Yeah, we don't need to do it in 24.
Okay. And then, so. Back to, Lemon Smith. Not for, Mr. Sanders, but for Judy, but I emailed you last week, it appears that. We're paying total, close to $500,000 in outsourced engineering costs.
For this year,
Well, with Janet Fleming and Lemon Smith.
but Janet Fleming is, that was a contract awarded by council in May of 22, and that is for the bridge, and that is where 95% of those expenses are paid for by other entities, not the borough.
Okay, so let's just focus on Lemon Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Sanders, this is nothing against you and your firm, but it appears Green Tree is a cash cow for Lemon Smith. We're spending $300,000 on Lemon Smith this year. We talked about, and we talked about at the last meeting, hiring a full-time engineer.
Mhm. So I can certainly give council some of the rundown, so and you mentioned it, I would have brought the spreadsheets that I have, but, in 2021 was our last year, to have in-house engineering. And I believe we spent just over $200,000 on engineering, and that was in 2021. In 2022, that number came down to, I believe, under 175,000. 2023, I think it came up to maybe about 190,000. And yes, this year it is up, but it is up because we were doing a lot of projects. We have the engineering of the Arla project, engineering of the Glencoe project, the Holiday Drive, the road program was very extensive this year. There was a lot of shifting that had to take place due to the change of what roads we were going to do, which required coordination, a lot of it with PA American One. So, yeah, I agree that the engineer, Jason and I have actually had conversations about it. But we're spending a lot of money. We're spending millions of dollars on infrastructure improvements, and they all need engineering. So we can certainly entertain the thought of bringing an in-house engineer back. But even when we had an in-house engineer, we were still spending anywhere from $30,000 to $75,000 a year on outside engineering.
And another point, in terms of our rates compared to our competitors, our rates are significantly less based on our overhead model. The other aspect, those projects that we just mentioned, including the MS4 mandate, if you have an in-house engineer, add those costs on top of the fees that you paid us, and that would be your delta, if you will.
But again, I'm not adverse to bringing in additional help because I've taken on a lot of the just administrative, management of the projects because Jason they can't make any of the decisions. And that comes to me. Quite frankly, I enjoy it. I like being involved at that level. It gives me a greater understanding of the different things that going on in the community. It's helped me learn a lot more about the community. But, I think if you just look at the numbers, you'll realize that, then you would be spending almost as much and you would have one person as opposed to a team of people that certainly have, different areas of expertise. So it's just something that, if we would go back to that conversation, something I would want to make sure council considers.
Well, then I guess I should make a motion that we adjourn this meeting. Works. Well, we did the pledge of allegiance.
Do it anytime.
Okay. That's- Then
Oh,
we
yeah,
don't need to.
Wait.
Because we have, what about the audio video? I don't know if I specifically saw that in the,
It is, yes, it's in capital data,
Yeah.
budgeted to recarpet this room, mess, and do a new audio. So just give you a little insight as to what we're looking at. So this screen, we would not really be using as much, not for council meetings. We would have a large screen on the back wall, which is still not completely ideal, but it's about the only option available to us. And I think council would be able to see it fine, and the camera would pick it up. And then we would also upgrade all of the microphones
Okay, I see it now,
and the
so-
deck equipment.
Mr. Panther.
So can we adjourn?
Yeah, we can.
If we're gonna- Well, however, just some notes. I'm not sure, Judy, are you aware we're hosting the COG meeting on
Next Thursday.
this Thursday?
No, next Thursday.
Okay.
Oh, no, this Thursday.
This Thursday.
Yeah, next Thursday's Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so, it was pointed out to me that there is no COG representative. It's one thing that we're hosting it, but yet not even having a representative.
I think it would be great if you did.
Yeah, I will volunteer for this month.
Why only this?
Well, because I did my service for many years with the COG. So anyways, usually when we host a COG, they like to see local, the council stop in and say hi and
What's time is it?
7 o'clock. usually.
7th, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I just wanted to make a note that everyone's invited. And it's this.
I agree, I think
Thursday.
on number. I understand pretty well. He's a good ally with us.
So I guess we'll adjourn to a executive session.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
During the workshop.